I think there's a lot of overlap between e-commerce and software in terms of understanding motivators and leveraging those. I think a big difference with software compare or B2B software in specific compared to D2C or e-commerce is that whoever you're talking to also has to keep in mind other people's motives and other people's needs to get buy-in, and they're not just purchasing for themselves.
Hey everyone, welcome to The Brand Behavior. I'm your host, Juntae DeLane, and today we're diving into something that's completely reshaping how brands connect with their audiences. That's the power of personalization in crafting unique customer journeys. You know, in a world where consumers are bombarded with thousands of marketing messages daily, the ability to deliver truly personalized experiences has never been more crucial. And the data backs it up too. Brands that excel in personalization are seeing up to 40% higher revenue growth than their competitors. And today we're going to be unpacking the strategies, tools, and mindsets needed to create meaningful, personalized experiences across different touch points in a landscape that's increasingly shaped by data, privacy concerns, and evolving customer expectations. I'm joined by two incredible guests who are doing great work in this space. We have Colby Flood, founder of Brighter Click, a digital marketing agency specializing in e-commerce and SaaS company. Colby's agency has been a growth partner for startups that have raised over $243 million in series funding with deep expertise in creative strategy and data-driven marketing. And joining us as well, we have Sarah Fruy. She is the VP of marketing at Rocketbot with nearly 20 years experience of B2B and B2C expertise. Sarah has led 7 successful rebrand initiatives and contributed to Pantheon's journey to unicorn status with a $1 billion valuation. Welcome to both of you. How's everyone doing?
Good.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on. Where are you guys located?
I'm in Oakland, California, so just outside of San Francisco in the Bay Area.
I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina, about 2 hours from now, or sorry, 4 hours from now. It's going to be buzzing with the Hurricanes in round 3 of the playoffs. So excited for that.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Well, good luck. Good luck on that for sure. I had a chance to visit Raleigh. Love it. Doing some speaking engagements at the Digital Summit there. And I'm a Bay Area kid. So Cal undergrad. So yeah. And I've lived in Oakland as well. So yeah, pleasure to have both of you on the call. So before we dive in, I wanted to share something that happened to me last week. I was shopping online for a new pair of running shoes. And after visiting one retailer site, I started getting ads that not only showed me exact shoe sizes and shoes that I looked at, but also suggested complimentary items based upon my previous purchases from them. But here's the thing. I got an email from them addressing me by my name with personalized discounts on those exact shoes. And it wasn't just a generic 10% off. Right? It was specifically tailored for my loyalty tier. And this seamless integration of personalization across channels didn't just make me feel recognized, but it also made me feel valued as a customer. And this is exactly what we're talking about today, right? You know, how personalization isn't just about showing relevant products anymore. It's about crafting holistic journeys that feel intuitive and consistent across every touch point. So let's start with a fundamental question for you both. What does personalization mean to you in today's marketing landscape, and how has that definition evolved in the recent years?
Yeah, Sarah, do you want to go first or?
Sure. I mean, for me, I feel like personalization kind of evolved pretty quickly over the past few years. I mean, at one point when we were doing it, it felt really creepy. And I would actually get complaints from some of our customers on the website of like, how do you know my name? How do you know where I work? Delete my data, and they would kind of freak out. And there was sort of like this fear behind it. And I think that the transfer that I've seen is now, rather than being afraid of it, I think people sort of expect personalization. And then when you don't deliver on that, it's a way to sort of disconnect from that consumer that you've already like brought into the funnel. And so really for marketers, I think the biggest challenge is like data cleanliness and making sure that there's a consistent journey throughout so that it doesn't get disconnected or interrupted by some sort of like misinformation or wrong turn where the messaging and the intent sort of gets jumbled with other types of programs that you're running. And then now with AI, I think there's just a lot of opportunity to kind of excel those learnings, deepen that personalization journey, and really kind of unlock more potential with that as a way to connect better with your prospects and your customers.
Yeah, I agree. I think personalization used to be very much like, I can't think of the character on the keyboard, but basically dynamic first name, dynamic last name, like that was really personalization. And now it's a lot more about, and for context, I really focus on the acquisition side. So Facebook ads, LinkedIn ads, whatever it may be. It's about knowing the right message to the right person at the right time. And it's about knowing how to deliver it in a native way on the platform that you're talking about as well. And there's a lot to unpack there, because right time doesn't necessarily just mean the right level of the funnel. It means right time of year as well. If we're talking D2C or e-commerce, seasonality is a big part in what you're talking about and the order in which you prioritize features or benefits for your product, so people can understand if what you're delivering is something that they're actually looking for. We really focus heavy on making sure we understand the voice of customer, doing the social listening, and then making creative that speaks to their actual needs and things that they are looking for.
Agreed. And so let's dive into the one of the most fundamental aspects of this conversation is what makes personalization truly effective. And a recent study showed that 71% of consumers expect companies to deliver personalized interactions, and 76% get frustrated when this doesn't happen. For our audience of marketers, brand managers, understanding these foundations is critical for creating meaningful interactions with their audiences. But Colby, we understand that creative is the true engine of ad performance, especially nowadays. But how does creative strategy intersect with personalization, especially for e-commerce brands?
Yeah. I mean, I think the first big thing with creative in 2025 now is creative is your targeting, especially for Facebook ads. We've lost a lot of targeting abilities through is it GDPR? I
Deprecation.
can't think of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. CCPA, all
Yeah.
that stuff.
All the acronyms out there. So creative really is your targeting now. And similar to how you said earlier that you were looking at shoes and then you started getting ads for shoes and you started seeing different things for shoes, knowing what people are searching and then using that to guide the copy on your creative and the copy in the text is very beneficial. The other thing for personalization is really understanding the voice of customer. I saw a skincare ad earlier. It was a sunscreen for men, and the copy said a sunscreen that doesn't smell like coconut, right? So they're really resonating on the fact that it's a manly smelling or not a like floral smelling sunscreen that people might be able to use, right? It's understanding the things that people want and people need. And that comes through looking at things like Reddit conversations and referrals on Reddit and social listening on ad comments and whatever it may be, so that you can see what products matter at what times of year that you're pushing.
Yeah. And so when we think about creative and using those outlets like Reddit and other platforms in which you can execute on social listening, what differences or nuances between e-commerce and SaaS companies would be applicable when focusing on those channels?
Yeah, I'd love to hear Sarah's thoughts on this, but I was thinking on this the other day, and I think there's a lot of overlap between e-commerce and software in terms of understanding motivators and leveraging those. I think a big difference with software or B2B software in specific compared to D2C or e-commerce is that whoever you're talking to also has to keep in mind other people's motives and other people's needs to get buy-in, and they're not just purchasing for themselves. A lot of times with e-commerce, if somebody's making a purchase, they're the core decision maker and they're buying it because they want it. But if you're if you're looking to purchase something for your brand to invest in, and it's a software, you need to make sure the CEO, the CMO, the COO, whoever it may be, the CRO is getting their needs met as well. And there's a much longer buying window when it comes to software versus e-commerce.
Sarah, what's your
Yeah,
thought
I
about
think for me, when I think about like social listening tools in the world of B2B, a lot of it is really like unlocking consumer insights in terms of how they're leveraging your products. I think there's one way where, we're with the product team internally and we think about the use cases that are pretty obvious. And then you can go into Reddit or other social channels and you hear people kind of like sharing their stories and their experiences. And there's this aha moment about how they're leveraging it in a different way. And I've actually experienced that also on like the CPG side. Like I worked for Linkio, which is an influencer marketing platform for a while. And we had an influencer who was supposed to use a product in a bathroom setting. And then she actually filmed it in her bedroom. And at first the brand was like freaking out. And we were like, well, trust the process. She knows the product. She knows her audience. Like, let her tell this story in the way that she wants to. And the one in the bedroom versus the one in the bathroom actually completely outperformed all the other creative for that campaign. And the brand didn't know that. We didn't know that as their partner on the agency side. It was the consumer in this influencer space who really understood this new way to sort of promote this product and kind of unlock that aha moment. And I think that that's really where a lot of the insights can kind of come is from your products, or sorry, from your customers talking about the use cases of the products online.
That
Yeah,
makes total
if I can
sense
just
there.
say really
Yeah.
quickly, sorry, I'll just say I think that's so important. I think that's another big aspect of personalization is getting away from narratives that the brand essentially wants to push or just objectives that they want to push and really leaning into UGC or influencers or whatever it may be to show different vehicles to use the product.
Yeah, so we're talking about personalization in a way that these UGC or influence or content creators are positioning the offering that can open up new ideas, new campaigns, and so on for the brand. Now, kind of going back to what I had talked about in terms of personalization for e-commerce and SaaS, and looking at how the differs from direct to consumer or B2C versus B2B. Um, do you think that there is limited information from a B2B perspective, right, than from a B2C perspective? And if so, if there's specific tools that you guys may use to try to leverage B2C data versus B2B data?
I mean, on the B2B side, I look at it from two different lenses, right? Like you can use things like Clearbit and Sixth Sense and stuff like that to identify like job title, industry, things of that nature, like demographic type information. And then there's also another level of insights in terms of like the user behavior. Once they hit your website, once they hit your product, what actions are they taking? What can you learn from that? And I think there's two different ways to sort of personalize that journey. Are you looking at them as like a persona and like a role-based personalization strategy, or are you looking at activities and trying to personalize the journey based on actions they've taken? Like, did they watch your demo? Did they like do something in the product that indicates that they're more likely to purchase it versus do like a freemium trial? Like there's certain like leading indicators where you can start to trigger different email campaigns, different messaging online to sort of surround that person with the right journey. And that's kind of like the two different lenses I sort of take it is persona based or activity based, and which direction do I want to lead that buyer in based on that information.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think a complexity that we might be looking at as well is with D2C, while you still need to take time to understand the voice of customer and who your buyer personas are, with B2B SaaS, the actual decision maker or decision makers can change based on the size of the company, based on just the overall organizational structure, which can add some complexity as well. And I think one thing to think about as you're executing your marketing plan or you're planning your marketing plan is looking at your annual contract value or your guarantee and lifetime value and understanding what you can really afford to do to acquire a new customer and then building out your personalization based off of that as well. If you are able to do, account-based marketing and go to events and do things like that, you can get a lot more personalized with your marketing. You can have thought leaders or build thought leadership for your team and make sure that if you're selling a product to CFOs, your CFO should be making thought leadership content because they relate to that audience the most, right? But if you're a $19, $29 a month software, you will have some fewer abilities to be able to acquire customers with full personalization just because you will have to go a bit more mass market that way.
Yeah, and I think, I've had a lot of experience working on enterprise level brands where you're dealing with like very long deal cycles, large contracts that involve a lot of different stakeholders. And, you mentioned earlier, Colby, about like timing is everything in D2C in terms of like seasonality. Well, for B2B, I think it's really like, when do you talk to certain stakeholders in that buyer journey? Like there's going to be your initial champion that's going to bring this to their boss and be like, hey, I want to use this tool in my job. There's going to be the budget holder. There's going to be maybe somebody that has to do some kind of compliance review, some sort of IT audit, some kind of security, review, things like that. And as you kind of get into the journey, knowing when those different stakeholders are going to enter in the conversation and how you need to personalize the experience to speak to them directly. Because like, for example, when I was at Pantheon, you might have a developer who says they want to use our hosting platform, but the head of IT needs to make sure that it fits within the tech stack. But the marketer is actually their boss because they own the website. Like those are three very different personas, three very different conversations, and three very different value drivers that they're trying to get out of one solution, and making sure that you're having the appropriate conversation with each of those individuals and then collectively as a group so that they're all kind of like grokking it together at the right time in the journey.
And do you feel like when that happens, you're almost like training the person that once you're in the sales cycle or sales process, do you almost feel like you're training the initial person you're talking to be almost like a sales rep to have all the information they need to effectively communicate to the other decision makers the stuff that would help them as well?
100%. I mean, like I think about myself as a manager too, right? That's one of the things with B2B is that sometimes you can sort of like understand the process as a consumer is like I'll have different individuals on my team that want to buy different technology solutions. I'm not the end user, but they need to convince me that this is like the appropriate amount to pay. This is like going to help me in XYZ ways. It's going to take me this long to sort of learn how to use this new tool and onboard it. Do I need to bring on a third party to help implement it? Like kind of building that whole case around that. And then I'm going to have to go to like the C-suite and say like, okay, this is a big tool we need to invest in, and have that case sort of like built out for me. And the stronger like my team member can do convincing me, the better, and the easier it's going to be for me to convince, executive leadership that this is like worthy of a multi-year contract and like large line budget item and things like that. Because again, you're dealing with, big investments for a company. Sometimes it's going to be an organizational shift that could impact your business for years to come, because the lift is so heavy integrating from one solution to another that like that can cost you your job if you make the wrong choice, or it can get you a promotion if you make the right one. And so the stakes can be really high when you're buying software solutions, depending on, the line item cost.
That's so true.
Yeah. And I know it seems like when it comes to the B2B industry and personalization, oftentimes B2B industry, B2B brands have access to a large swath of personalized data in their prospects, but they don't necessarily use that data to communicate, right, their offering. Because it seems like a lot of B2B brands, at least ones that I've noticed and I've worked with, are really scared to be over personalized with regard to their communications, because they may feel like they're alienating some segments of their audiences. Like they may have, I don't know, a coffee brand that would just say something like, hey, do you enjoy coffee in the morning? Yes or no, right? Or if it's, do you enjoy this type of coffee, French roast or, Americano, whatever the case may be, right? Like it seems like many B2B brands are not using that level of personalization to shape their communications, especially when you look or compare it to B2C brands, right? That are taking more risks and using that data to fully communicate highly personalized messages. There's a strong disconnect, but I don't know. Are you guys seeing that there in the market for the clients that you're working with?
I think, and Sarah, you could disagree, and I'd love to talk through it, but I think that's part of the shift from like lead generation to demand generation, where it's been so popular to have gated PDFs and content that's very brand focused or product feature focused. And it's really focused on volume of leads and volume. So you can make sure you're just pushing pipeline for your SDRs and your BDRs and getting things going. But I think a lot of the industry, or at least in my small ecosphere of content that I consume on LinkedIn and things, are pushing towards demand generation, which is a lot more about personalization and creating entertaining and educational content. So you're not just focusing on trigger ads or offer purchase ads. You're focusing on exploration and evaluation as well, things that can kind of broaden your funnel and open things up so you can get new opportunities in the pipeline that way.
Yeah, I think also it kind of comes down to business size, right? Like when you're dealing with a lot of like consumer-based products, these are large corporations. They have massive marketing departments at their disposal. They have the ability and the budget to really personalize those journeys in ways that certain SaaS companies don't. I mean, like you have like your Adobe's and Salesforces of the world that also seem to have like almost unlimited resources when it comes to their marketing department. They can create really amazing personalized journeys in these landing pages that are incredibly dynamic. And then you have your startups, which might have like a great solution, but there's actually like a really small team behind that. And they're maybe putting more of their budget into sales or customer success or like these other channels and things. And so I think it's really just a lot of B2B companies are probably resource strapped in terms of like who they have to resource and how many different tools they can invest in any given time, because it can add up pretty quickly once you start to build out that technology stack and have the right level of expertise managing it, because when it goes south, it can really hurt your brand. And so you need to be really thoughtful about how you're leveraging those leads. And it can be very high touch, especially when you have like a sales team and things like that, where they really want to start to kind of control that personalized outreach more so than the marketing team at a certain point in the journey.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's so important to think about, of course, when you're a startup, when you're getting started, you do have to be very sales focused, right? But keeping in mind building brand and the importance behind that, and for two main reasons. One, oftentimes when there's economic downturn, pipeline slows down, and it's the people that have brand affinity and brand awareness, or the companies that do, that continue to be able to drive sales that way. And two, especially on the B2B SaaS side, as AI continues to buzz and people continue to try and use AI to build products and it becomes cheaper and cheaper to build software, so the barrier of entry continues to decline, it's going to be less focused about the product and it's more focused about the brand. I mean, if you think about how you describe software today, you think, okay, are you using Hotjar? Okay, you're asking if they're using a heat mapping software, but you're using Hotjar because that's the one that's top of mind. Are you using Zapier? Because really you're talking about an automation software, but Zapier is the brand that has the most affinity on the market that way. And I think transitioning over to personalization, but also just brand building is going to be a huge impactor for software companies in the coming years.
But how
Yeah.
do you?
And I think that I think it extends beyond the brand. Like nowadays, especially like in spaces like LinkedIn, I don't really see company handles at all in my
Yeah,
feed anymore. It's just
personal.
people. And so I think there's like the brand recognition of like, do you remember the name of this? But also it's like the senior leadership team. Who are these voices out there, like out there advocating for the brand, telling these stories and really personifying what this company means to its consumer in a very like tangible way. And I think that any C-level executive who's not out there trying to create a personal brand that reflects their business brand, it's a total miss at this point, because a lot of those messages aren't even being seen like in the organic sense the way that it used to be.
100%.
Yeah. Now, when we think about data-driven personalization strategies, and in particular, uh, Colby, you mentioned earlier how you have experience in launching Facebook ads and so on. What data points are most valuable when developing personalized ad creative? What are you looking at?
Yeah, that's a good question. Just so I understand, are you talking about what insights, qualitative and quantitative, we use to decide what ads we're going to make, or what quantitative data we assess when we're trying to see what ads performed and what we want to do more of, or both?
Specifically regarding the creative, the ad
Like
creative.
the planning process of it?
Yes, in terms of using these data points to develop the right ad creative that could potentially resonate with the
Yeah,
targets.
good question. So we'll generally start with a business audit. Now, I know we're kind of split between B2B and D2C in this conversation. I will be leaning a little bit more towards D2C with what I'm about to explain, but there is some B2B overlap with it as well with software. We'll generally start with the business, and we want to look at their sales data through Shopify or whatever it is, and understand if there's any real seasonality with products or collections or product sets that way. And then we take that and we look at Google Trend Search, and we want to understand what Google Trends or what keywords are getting searched throughout the year and try to find some seasonality with that as well. And I'll give you a quick example. If we're talking about a skincare brand, just think about when you're watching television, big picture wise, like it makes sense. Wintertime, people are normally talking about moisturizing as the key benefit of the products that they're selling, right? Because people battle flaky skin. Summertime, it's UV protection and UV damage repair. Fall time, it's UV recovery and it might be exfoliating, right? So we look for seasonality in the business as a whole so we can go macro before we go into the weeds on messaging strategy. Once we have that mapped out, a seasonality calendar for the product and for the business, we'll go in and do voice of customer and competitor research. So we'll look at Reddit, we'll look at reviews on their website, we'll look at ad comments, wherever we can get data from it. If they're a B2B company that does actual like ICP interviews or conversations, that's a gold mine. And now you can just run those through ChatGPT. And then we'll take that and compare that to the messaging that is on their website and ads and their competitors' websites and ads. And we look for rational and emotional motivators found in all of that so we can understand what customers are talking about and what our client and their competitors are talking about, and then how we can find things based on frequency ratio that are most important to the competitors and might be getting missed or might be needed. And then we organize those into 4 buckets of ads. And that is trigger ads, which is you have a problem, here's a solution. Those get used more often than not in Facebook ads or in creative. You have offer purchase ads, which are here's a bundle, the last thing you want to do is discount, but here's a discount, for example. Those are the 2 categories that get used the most. And if you really rely on those early on, it's understandable. But as you're scaling, what you'll see is turbulence in your ad account performance, and you'll see difficulties in scaling, because if you're talking about trigger ads or offers all the time, Let's talk about dry, flaky skin, for example. If you're not looking at the macro, people are trying to purchase for that in a very specific time window. So when they need it, they're highly active looking for it. When they don't care about it. So we also have the exploration and the evaluation ads, which help educate customers in like a casual, compelling way so that they can make sure that they're learning about your industry or your product or whatever it may be. And then evaluation ads, which is like us versus them or just overall benefits. So that is from a high level, the overall process that we'll use. And then we'll create a 90-day plan for messaging angles and strategies to test out based on the seasonality, based on the products, based on the buyer personas that we go for that way.
Yeah. And
Sorry,
for
that was a lot.
startups with, well, no, that, I mean, I think
That was a great
that was a great
explanation. It's super
overview,
in-depth.
yeah, of the process there and how to extract that data for some of your ads and creatives. Now, for startups with limited budgets, limited data sources to tap into, what approach do you recommend for beginning their personalization journey? I think for anyone on the panel here.
I mean, I have a lot of experience in this area. I think it's one area that I like to start in is like just doing customer research, like scheduling interviews with folks in your target audience, running surveys, gathering data from your product and engineering team, from the website, from your marketing ops folks, and just sort of creating this portfolio of whatever information you have access to. And then one of the things that I always try and gain in terms of like proprietary information is like, how confident are we in this data source? Like, because that is going to affect my ability to make personalization decisions. And I've walked in organizations where the marketing ops person is like, this is terrible. Our data is not clean. I don't trust it at all. And that's really important to know because I don't want to plug in a bunch of first names and find out that they aren't first names or getting titles wrong or misspelled or jumbled. And then all of a sudden your email campaign is like, you're not getting any of the results that you want because the data wasn't collected in a great manner. And so it's really being thoughtful about the information that you're gathering and then creating better hygiene for it. And then starting to slowly layer on new tools for the team to start to adapt. If you try and do too much at once, it can kind of explode and you're building out that tech stack. So you need to be really practical, not only of like, what are we trying to solve for right now, but what are we starting to solve for a year from now or a couple of years down the road? Like, is this the same tool that I'm going to need then? If not, like, should we be thinking farther term or actually, no, like we have these goals to hit and this is the tool we need today, knowing that in 3 years, we're going to have to rip and replace this for a more advanced solution if we hit the goals that we're trying to achieve. And so it's a lot of, planning and getting good process in place and building like an infrastructure that you can expand on over time versus thinking like too short term or too long term. You have to be really thoughtful about how you're building that technology stack and the information that you're feeding into it.
I agree with Sarah 100%. I think what she started with is the most important thing, especially for B2B software companies, which is scheduling actual interviews with your customers. It's slow. It's not a fast process, and startups, especially tech startups that are funded, like to move very fast. But it's so important. And if you can ingrain that in your company from top down early on, you'll build product in the right direction and you'll have your marketing go in the right direction. We're working on a marketing analytics platform and went into it with the idea that it's going to be an operational tool for agencies. It's an operational efficiency tool. That's what agencies need. Through many ICP interviews, we've discovered normally, or I say normally, generally, if their headcount is under 25, founder is still leading ops, operational efficiency is the last thing that they're caring about. They want to look more professional for their clients and they want to have a better just visual representation of themselves. It's not until a head of ops comes in, normally around that 2025 headcount, that they start tracking time by client, by team member, and start looking for operational improvements that way. Completely changes messaging, completely changes product focus, all of that, just because those interviews were done.
No, that's right. I mean, it's all about focusing on not only building the product, but the solution, right? And oftentimes, the founders that we work with, we have to shift their mindset because they're more product focused. We think they should be more solutions focused, right? So that, no, I definitely give kudos to that for sure. Sarah, I know you have experience at Rocketbot, and I'm wondering with regard to personalized experiences that you're able to develop for some of your clients, how are you able to do so without crossing the privacy line, right? I know you mentioned you had interaction with a potential customer. I'm not sure if it was Rocketbot, but that didn't really
That was back at
like the data.
Can.
Okay, yeah, Patheon, yes, yes. So, there's obviously a thin line between things being data that's collected on consumers being very cool as marketers, but also creepy at the same time for some consumers. So give me your thoughts on that. How do you balance that line?
I think it's like there's certain stages in the buyer journey when it comes to B2B, when you're filling out forms and things like that, that you're collecting first party data from your prospects. And so that's a great way to start to like enrich, some of the things that you maybe have scraped the internet about them and some of their behaviors. And so in that sense, they're raising their hand like, hey, I filled out this form. I gave you my job title. I gave you my name. I gave you my email. I'm expecting these things. I think that where it can go wrong, I actually wrote about this on LinkedIn recently, is like I had to fill out a form once. I put my phone number in, and then all of a sudden a rep is like texting me that I had never been introed to. And it was like, that crossed the line for me personally as a consumer of this B2B product. And it eroded my trust. Like, I feel like you need to know when to use that data that you have and when it's appropriate, because you can cross lines in certain contexts when it comes to building those business relationships. And that's really what B2B a lot of times is about, at least on the enterprise side. When you're getting into, the more technical, just like getting onto the website, getting people to purchase, credit card type buys and things like that, then it's really sort of like, again, looking at information they've gathered or creating really specific journeys for certain personas. Like if they're not like opting into my cookies and things like that, is there a button I can put on there? Like, for example, at Rockbot, like our three greatest industries were restaurants, retail, and fitness. And so putting imagery, putting language, putting CTAs on the page that would help these people sort of self-identify on the website. And then I can take them down this track. So then they're only seeing fitness logos. They're only seeing case studies around fitness brands. They're only seeing language that like makes sense for a gym owner. And then that personalization journey isn't necessarily like, hey, Sarah, gym owner. It's like, I know that you're a gym owner and these things matter, without, having the creepy factor, or you just don't have that information because they're not allowing you to cookie them. But you can still create that personal journey based on like their actions on the website and showing the right information. So I think it's kind of a tug and pull. And so when you can get that information and people have shared it with you, leveraging that in the email, showing them that you're listening, that you care about who they are and what matters to them, and putting in those little bits of information into the email campaigns that really make sense and connect with them. And then on the website, depending on what you have available to you, creating journeys where the content around them feels very native to their role. So it's almost like, wow, this company was made just for me and my industry, when someone else is seeing a totally different experience the next page over, but they're trying to drive to the same, landing page for pricing and purchase.
Yeah. And so let's talk about measuring ROI, right? And how personalization can impact the ROI. I know, Colby, you've worked with some startups. How quickly do they typically see returns for implementing personalization strategies?
Yeah, that's always a it depends question, because there's so many things outside of the control of the agency when you're in meta ad space or a different ad space. I mean, generally we feel regardless of the service, an agency should be focusing on delivering incremental compounding growth the first 30, 60, 90 days. There really needs to be some sort of growth shown in the first 90 days to make sure that there is continued buy-in on the client side. The level of growth and the promised results really come down to analyzing a client's P&L, understanding their CAC that they need, understanding their CAC payback period that they can cushion based on the runway that they have. So it depends, but generally that 30, 60, 90-day timeline is where you want to start showing incremental growth across the business.
And Sarah, how do you demonstrate the ROI of personalization initiatives at Pantheon as the company grew to unicorn status?
It really depends on the use case in terms of where we're trying to personalize things. One of the things that really helped me kind of like up level my team and really the company as a whole was I built out an experimentation program on the marketing team side. We had tools like user testing and Optimizely that weren't being used by the marketing team when I showed up. And so very quickly, I started to build a habit around that. Eventually, I brought on like an agency to help me with my experimentation. And we like 4x'd our experiments on the website. We started bringing in stakeholders from all over the company and really created that test and learn mindset. And then depending on what we were trying to test, there were different KPIs. If it was on the website, there's one thing of like having a button where you change the language to make it more personal. And maybe you're getting higher clicks, but you can't always just react to that first response. You have to look down funnel. Is that increasing our pipeline? Is it increasing our revenue numbers? Just because you're getting an early indicator that this is driving a better activity on like your initial touch point, it needs to carry through farther down. And even though you might have that initial win, it's really important to carry through that data all the way through to purchase. So that was like a big thing in our program is, making sure you're measuring the right things along the way. And then, also just like internal feedback. When you think about simple things like pitch decks and things like that, like there's like your generic deck that looks like anything. How can we leverage, what do you call it? A DAM, a digital asset management tool to sort of make it really easy for the sales reps to go in and make something look super custom in a matter of minutes versus like having to go through the design queue and it takes like a week to turn that around. Like they're trying to sell now, making those things really easy so that like every touch point, whether it's digital, whether it's personal, whether it's coming from the sales rep, feels really unique and specific to that individual, like they're being cared for. I think as the company grew and we were able to add more team members and more resources, that was a way to really improve our personalization. And then, just thinking about what are your normal KPIs for this experience of like whether it's an email or a landing page or an ad campaign, and then how is the personalization impacting that behavior positively or negatively. You're not like rewriting the book. You're just sort of like adding that lens of personalization to see whether or not it's effective. And occasionally it isn't. Sometimes it actually has a negative effect and you need to kind of back off, and that's okay too.
Yeah. All right. Well, now it's time for one of my favorite segments of the show, Bad, Bold, or Brilliant. So this is where we examine some interesting personalization examples and discuss what we can learn from them. So let's start with Shopify's Wrapped campaign. They took personalization to new heights by transforming user listening data into shareable, personalized stories that highlight each user's unique music taste. And the campaign consistently generated massive engagement and social sharing each year. So I'm curious, would you categorize this approach as bad, bold, or brilliant?
This is for Spotify.
Yes.
I'm a fan of it. I think it creates a great opportunity to branch out to other people's networks and get your content out there in front of people without having to pay for it, and just generate user-generated content. I think it's become a not highly anticipated time of the year. That's dramatic, but it's become an anticipated time of the year at the end of the year to share what you're listening to and that you're a top 0.01% listener of Taylor Swift or whatever the artist may be. So I'm a fan of it.
Yeah, I like it too. I would much more on the brilliant side when it first came out, and it was like very new and very fresh and very different from anything else you were seeing from competitors and similar type products. Now it almost feels a little bit like gamification. Like I have kids and my kids are influencing it. So it's a joke amongst my peer group that like certain songs are at the top. Or for my son, like he's a huge Imagine Dragons fan and he got like a little video from them because we were in the top percent because he constantly plays it in our car. And so that was really neat to get these videos and kind of showing him like, wow, that's your favorite singer, like talking to you, like a little cameo video. And so like I think that's a way that they've taken it to the next level. I think you can't just like rely on something forever to always work. It's like, how can you make it a little bit more special, a little bit different the next year so that people are still engaged and they still want to share it. It's not just like another thing that like, oh, that was so last year or 2 years ago or whatever. You got to keep it fresh.
Yeah. Yeah. And I personally use their DJ feature where it's a DJ, AI DJ that aggregates all the songs that I liked or played throughout the year and creates a very personalized playlist for me. So I usually do that when I work out. Yeah. All right. So next up is Amazon's product recommendation engine. They famously generated 35% of their revenue through their personalized recommendation system, showing products based on browsing history, purchase behavior, and even what similar customers have bought. What's your take on this? Bad, bold, or brilliant?
I think it's super smart in the sense of, they're doing all different kinds of analysis at Amazon all the time, but like some of that where you're connecting completely disparate data points and then all of a sudden surfacing something that is actually related to people who buy these things. Like maybe all these people that buy these shirts actually also buy this thing for their kitchen. And you would never really connect that normally, like as a human, but when you're looking at the data patterns and you start to see this overlap, I think it really unlocks a lot of revenue potential that is really smart and really strategic. And for me as a customer, like I would much rather have you show me something that I want to buy versus showing me something that's like categorically appropriate. It saves me time. It saves me searching. And the more you learn my behaviors and my shopping patterns, like I'm happy to find new products, even if they feel completely unrelated to the last thing that I purchased from you. So I'm a fan of it.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a big fan of it. I think it makes life easier for customers. I always wonder if I say that because I'm a marketer, so I want us to have as much data as possible. But I'm also a fan of it showing me products that I want. I think that it also just opened up a lot of ad revenue opportunity for them, for marketers or for brands to push Amazon ads and have that personalization aspect, similar to like DPA or DABA campaigns with Facebook. So I'm a big fan of it. I think that it really does set Amazon apart from other retailers or marketplaces.
Yeah. I think it's good as well. I would go so far as say it's brilliant when it factors in the other business units of Amazon. So they, have Amazon Music, Amazon Prime. I think now they're even going into healthcare as well. So when taking all of those data points and coming up with product recommendations, I think that's really where it goes into the brilliance realm for me, for sure. And finally, let's take a look at Netflix's personalization strategy. They don't just recommend content based on viewing history, they even customize thumbnail images for you based on shows that you've watched previously. and the imagery might appeal, or what imagery might appeal to you most. How would you classify this strategy as bad, bold, or brilliant?
I'm going to be honest, I did not know that they personalized thumbnails. I'm actually a very big fan of that. Yeah, I haven't used the proper terminology. I'm going to go with brilliant for that just because I didn't know that they personalized thumbnails. I think that's a really powerful feature that could be beneficial on things like YouTube as well, to be able to personalize or have dynamic thumbnails based on someone. So yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah, I didn't know that either, but in my head, I feel the wheels turning of like how many different users they have and how quickly they can start to test out those images and start to show something that's going to get more time spent on the platform. And I would put that under the brilliant category. Just like their audience size is so massive that they can make really fast decisions with that. So I love it.
Yeah, I learned that they started to have this personalization with the thumbnails for their content when I was scrolling through, and there was a movie, and they had a Black person as a part of the key art, and I was like, I don't remember seeing any Black people in that movie. So I was like, oh, they must can make the connection to try to draw me into that movie. So that's when I'm like, aha, okay, I get it. So that, I think sometimes there are points where I think it is highly personalized, but the context around it may not be as on point as you may think. But ultimately, I do think it's good. Obviously, we all have spent, a long time scrolling through what to watch, right, on Netflix. And so certainly the updates to the thumbnails are going to help in that process. But the context, I think, is a little bit off, at least for my experiences. But yeah.
Well, I think that's important too with personalization, right? Like it needs to carry through. Like if you are going to show a certain type of person in a movie and then you watch the movie and that character has like a 5-second cameo, that's the same thing for like B2B of like if I'm showing you an ad and I'm promising you things and then you get to my landing page and I don't even mention that thing anymore, that consistency is a drop off. You start to lose trust with the audience. And so like if you're going to deliver on a promise, it needs to carry through in that user journey. To drive the outcome that you want, or else that's where those things start to fail.
Yeah, I'll double down that even more with the AI trend that's buzzing right now. I've seen many products where they market certain features and they either don't have the feature or the feature is broken when you get into the tool. So making sure that you deliver, like you're saying, is very important.
The Apple iPhone is a good example of that.
Yeah.
They launched
It's
without
good that
the
my
actual
phone's
AI.
on mute right now because a lot of times when people talk to me, Siri activates even though my name is Sarah, and it's just like I can't stand that thing. I love ChatGPT. Siri needs a lot of work still, which is really sad considering how long it's been around.
Yeah. All right, so let's close with some practical advice our listeners can implement right away and look for what's coming up in the horizon. Colby, what's one personalization strategy that businesses of any size can implement tomorrow without significant investment?
I think it's the biggest driver of impact, but it's also can take the most time. And it's one thing that Sarah mentioned earlier, which is having conversations with your customers or your ICP. Take the time, create a list of questions that you feel like you should ask based on their job title, based on their headcount size, and go through and try to spend, 1 to 2 per week interviews and take that time. It's very worth the investment.
And Sarah, based on your experience leading 7 rebrands, what's one way companies can start evolving their brand to be more personalization friendly?
I think having regular touch points, it's kind of similar to what Kobe says, is having regular touch points with your audience and understanding kind of the nuances between your prospects and your customers and how you want to speak to those different groups and not bundling them together. I think that's where a lot of B2B brands go wrong, is that they're always kind of focused on that acquisition messaging and strategy, and they forget to kind of re-engage with those customers and have different messages to them. And so being really thoughtful about who you're talking to, where they are in the buying process, and what's the right messaging to send to them versus like, a free trial or an upgrade. Those are two very different strategies, and you don't want to be lumping them together to spray and pray. But thinking about your audience, where they are at in the funnel, and how you can segment them appropriately to get the most value out of your time and your energy.
Makes sense. So before we wrap up, I want to make sure our listeners know where they can find more information about our amazing guests. So Colby, why don't you go ahead and give us more information about where people can find you, what you're offering, and so on.
Yeah, you can find me. I'm most active on LinkedIn. I'm starting to get more active on Twitter, but you can find me, Colby Flood, on LinkedIn, or you can go to brighterclick.com. You can check out the services that we offer. As I shared, we mainly do acquisition strategies for D2C and B2B companies. I don't really do too much retention, but mainly just the acquisition side.
And what about you, Sarah?
I'm also very active on LinkedIn, so feel free to connect. on there. I also have a website, www.sarahfruy.com, and I can help emerging startups with fractional CMO or marketing leadership support, particularly when you're in a growth phase and dealing with SaaS marketing issues there. And I'm also great with branding opportunities as well. So happy to connect.
Awesome. And you all know I'm Juntae DeLane, founder at Digital DeLane, full service digital marketing agency, helping to bring new brands, campaigns, and ideas to life. I want to thank Colby and Sarah for joining us for this incredible conversation about the power of personalization in crafting unique customer journeys. And thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in to this episode of The Brand Behavior. We hope you have gained valuable insights into how personalization can transform your marketing strategy and customer relationships. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform and visit our website at digitaldelane.com/podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review and, of course, share it with your network. With that said, we'll see you next time. Bye for now.